What would you do if the very family you once trusted suddenly announced a future where you no longer exist? And what if that announcement didn't just ignore you, but replaced you, erased you, and set the stage for a monarchy that moves forward without you? That's exactly what Prince Harry faced. And according to multiple insiders, his reaction wasn't calm. It wasn't controlled. It wasn't diplomatic. He screamed. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. But before we get there, before the outburst, before the shaking walls at Montecito, before the frantic calls across 3 time zones, we need to start with the moment that set everything in motion. A statement from Buckingham Palace so explosive, so unimaginable, that even seasoned royal commentators had to double-check whether it was real. Ask yourself this. What kind of announcement could make a grown man in his late 30s, a former soldier, a duke, a once-beloved royal, completely lose his composure? What could make him shout loud enough that staff outside the room heard every word? And why now? Why suddenly? Why was this moment, this week, this announcement, the final breaking point? Let's dig in. Because the tension didn't begin today. It didn't begin with Meghan's Hollywood pivot, nor the Netflix deals, nor the books, nor the interviews, nor the celebrity campaigns. No, this new monarchy announcement has roots buried years earlier, deep inside the rivalry between 2 brothers who once seemed inseparable. You remember those days, don't you? When William and Harry were the golden duo of the monarchy, the united front, the unstoppable pair, the living reminder of Princess Diana's spirit. 2 brothers who promised the world they would honor her legacy together. But what happened? How did we get here? To the moment Buckingham Palace announces a new era, a new leadership structure, a new monarchy under Prince William, while Harry spirals thousands of miles away. Before we answer that, here's something the public rarely thinks about. In royal families, announcements are never simply announcements. They are signals. They are warnings. And sometimes, they are declarations of power. This one was all 3. The palace didn't just say William would be stepping into a larger leadership role. They didn't just imply William was the stabilizing force, the future, the one the monarchy would rally behind. They made something crystal clear between the lines, something Harry immediately recognized. There is no seat waiting for him in the future monarchy. And this, according to insiders, is what triggered the screaming. But we're not at that point yet. Stick with me, because the deeper we go, the more you'll see that the palace announcement was not random, not impulsive, not symbolic. It was strategic. And here's the shocking twist. While the public saw a calm, polished, elegant statement, behind the scenes, it was chaos. Meetings at 3 a.m., debates over wording, concerns about legal implications, fights among advisors behind closed doors. Even more surprising? Some people inside the palace reportedly wanted to strip Harry from the announcement entirely, wipe any reference to him whatsoever. A clean slate, a fresh start, a monarchy with no shadows. But others argued that doing so would cause more problems, that ignoring Harry completely might look like an intentional snub, that it might escalate tensions even more. And you have to wonder, if this is how bad the conversations were before the announcement, what on earth was the reaction afterward? Let's rewind for a moment. The announcement wasn't even supposed to be this dramatic at first. It started as a routine update, an internal restructuring, a standard modernizing message, something meant to show progress, unity, stability. But as drafts circulated through offices, corridors, private apartments, and finally the desk of the king himself, something shifted. The tone hardened. The language sharpened. The future became clearer. And no matter what version you look at, the early drafts, the late-night edits, the whispered suggestions from senior advisors, they all had one thing in common. William was positioned as the center of the monarchy's next chapter. Harry was not. Now pause for a moment and think about the weight of that. For a man who grew up inside the monarchy, who knew its traditions, who once walked behind his mother's coffin as the whole world watched, being absent from a future vision of the crown wasn't just exclusion. It was exile by punctuation, a removal by choice, a message wrapped in ceremonial language. But here's where things get even more complicated. Because you would think that after years of criticism, distancing, interviews, and explosive media projects, Harry would have expected this. You'd think he would have been prepared, emotionally ready, strategically prepared. He wasn't. Why? Because according to insiders, Harry was operating under a very different assumption. That despite everything, despite the drama, despite the damage, there was still a space for him in the future. Maybe smaller, maybe symbolic, maybe limited, but a space. He believed, genuinely, that William, despite their differences, wouldn't completely close the door. Not on legacy, not on family, not on Diana's sons. But the announcement? That destroyed whatever version of the future Harry had imagined. Let me ask you something directly. Have you ever held on to an idea so tightly, even when the world around you had already moved on? A belief, a hope, a final thread you refused to let go of, even when everyone else could see it slipping through your fingers. That was Harry, and that's why the announcement hit him like a thunderstrike. According to palace staff, here's how it unfolded. Harry gets a message, a private notification, not a warning, not a courtesy call, not a diplomatic heads-up, just a time-stamped advisory. A statement will be released in 15 minutes. Not an hour, not half a day, 15 minutes. Enough time to open a link. Not enough time to prepare emotionally. Imagine staring at a message like that, knowing the world is about to change, and you no longer have any influence over the narrative. Imagine the pressure building behind your ribs, in your throat, in your mind, as you scroll through something that rewrites your place in a 1,000-year institution. That's the moment the screaming began. But we're not there yet, not fully. Because before we reach the breaking point, before we explore the words that made Harry explode, you need to see the machinery behind the scenes. The people pulling strings, the strategies being formed, the quiet alliances, the private fears. You need to understand what the palace announcement really meant, not the polished version, but the coded message buried inside it. And trust me, once we uncover that, Harry's reaction will make perfect, devastating sense. So let's peel back the curtain and look at what the public never sees. The emotional currents, the whispered conversations, the strategic silences that built up to this moment. Because the palace announcement was not just a reshuffling of roles, it was a seismic shift. A quiet earthquake disguised as a polite press release. And anyone who's followed the monarchy long enough knows. When Buckingham Palace writes between the lines, those lines shake the entire institution. But here's the twist. This shift didn't begin inside the palace. It began with William. For months, whispers floated through senior royal corridors. William is ready. Not ready someday. Not ready in the distant future. Ready now? His leadership style, calm, deliberate, strategic, had impressed world leaders, advisors, Commonwealth nations, and internal staff. In private, some aides even joked that William had already become the Shadow King, long before any official title made it public. But Harry? Harry didn't see it that way. He didn't want to see it that way. Because acknowledging William's rise meant acknowledging something darker. That the monarchy simply did not need him anymore. That's a brutal realization, especially for someone raised to believe he was part of a two-piece legacy, a partnership, a duo carrying Diana's torch. William the heir, Harry the spare, two sides of one royal coin. But coins get flipped. Coins get separated. Coins get replaced. And when the palace readied its announcement, they didn't even need a coin anymore. They had a crown, and it was already sitting neatly above William's head. Let's zoom in on the hours before it all went public. Inside Buckingham Palace, the air was thick with decision-making. You know that feeling when the temperature in a room drops, when everyone becomes hyper-aware of the weight of a moment. That's what insiders describe. An electric stillness. Advisors straightening papers. Assistants pacing hallways. Phones buzzing nonstop. One staff member reportedly said, "It felt like the ground was shifting, but we weren't allowed to react." And in a way, the ground was shifting. This wasn't simply William being praised or elevated. This was William officially stepping into the role everyone secretly knew he'd been preparing for. Leader, anchor, stabilizer, the future and the present wrapped into one. Meanwhile, miles away in Montecito, Harry had no idea what was coming. None. He didn't know that William had been meeting privately with constitutional experts. He didn't know that the king had approved new internal structures weeks earlier. He didn't know that senior advisors had already created a continuity plan. A roadmap for the monarchy's future, and that his name barely appeared in it. And when he finally saw the announcement, it wasn't just the content that shattered him. It was the realization that decisions had been made about the family, about the institution, about the future, and he wasn't consulted. Not once. Not for a single sentence. But here's the part that stings the most. Some insiders claim that if Harry had maintained even a minimal working relationship with the palace, he would have been notified, consulted, or at least acknowledged. But the bridges he burned? They weren't just symbolic. The monarchy stopped viewing him as a participant and started viewing him as an external factor, a wild card, a risk. Think about that for a moment. Imagine watching your family, the only institution you ever knew, move forward as if you're no longer part of the blueprint. Imagine scrolling through formal language that makes it clear your brother is stepping into a role you once performed beside him, and you aren't even a footnote. Now here's where things get disturbing, and where the story edges into the emotional territory most people never consider. Because while the palace announcement seemed calm, structured, and diplomatic, Harry's private reaction was the opposite. Explosive, immediate, volcanic. Witnesses say they heard something crash inside the Montecito home. A slammed door, raised voices. But what triggered the spike in anger wasn't the announcement itself. It was a single line near the end. A line that, to the public, sounded routine, harmless even. But to Harry, it was a dagger. A line that emphasized the unity of the working royal family moving forward. To everyone else, this sounded like ceremonial wording, a standard expression of continuity. But to Harry, it was confirmation. Confirmation that working royal family no longer included him. That he had been formally, strategically, and permanently separated from the core of the institution. Separated from the crown. Separated from the legacy. Separated from the future. And what made it worse? He didn't see it coming. Not like this. Because despite everything, despite distance, despite criticism, despite interviews and accusations, Harry still believed there was a path back someday. A return. A reconciliation. A role, even a small one, waiting for him. But this announcement shattered that illusion. Let's pause for a moment and ask something real. Have you ever held on to the belief that someone would one day forgive you, only to discover they moved on long before you did? That's the emotional terrain we're walking through now. And that's what makes Harry's reaction both shocking and painfully human. Now here's where the story tightens. Harry wasn't the only one blindsided. Meghan was too. Insiders say she read the announcement 3 times, slowly, carefully, searching for Harry's name. A mention, a reference, anything. But the silence? It was loud. And that silence hit Harry harder than any public criticism ever could. Because when a monarchy speaks through omission, that omission is intentional. Still, the true breaking point, the moment that triggered the scream, wasn't silence. It was something far more dangerous. Something hidden inside the final paragraphs. Something coded, subtle, but devastating. A portion of the announcement hinted at future structural simplifications, strategic streamlining, and a redefined core of senior working royals. To the public, just corporate-style language. To Harry, a threat, a message, a signal of permanent exclusion. And that's when the outrage erupted. That's when the shouting started. That's when the walls of Montecito shook. Because Harry realized something chilling. Not only was he excluded from the future, William was rising without him. The monarchy was stabilizing without him. The public was accepting it without him. And the person at the center of this new monarchy? His own brother. But what happened after the scream? After the anger? After the frantic calls and the desperate attempts to understand the hidden implications? That was far more shocking. Because soon after the announcement, something else emerged. Something that revealed Harry had misunderstood only half the picture. The other half, even darker. And here's where the story sharpens. Because everything you've heard so far, the announcement, the silence, the missing acknowledgement, the coded language, was only the surface. The crack in the glass. The tremor before the actual earthquake. The real shock came moments later, when Harry received a second message. A short one. A cold one. And according to a source close to the situation, a devastating one. It wasn't from the palace. It wasn't from Charles. It wasn't even from William. It came from someone Harry once trusted deeply. Someone he never expected to hear from today. The message was only 10 words long. 10 words. But those 10 words are what reportedly made Harry scream louder than anyone in the house had ever heard before. Because those words confirmed something he had feared for months. The monarchy wasn't just moving forward without him. It was preparing for something bigger, something irreversible, and Harry was the last to know. And here's the shocking part. Those 10 words didn't describe the new monarchy. They didn't explain the transition. They didn't soften the blow. They told Harry why he hadn't been consulted, why he had been excluded, why the announcement felt colder than anything the palace had released before. It hinted at a decision that had been made quietly, secretly, deliberately, a decision that would reshape the family structure permanently, a decision that involved William directly, a decision that put Harry on the outside with no path back in. Imagine that moment. Imagine the silence just before the mind snaps into clarity or panic. Imagine the weight behind the ribs, the surge in your chest, the mix of ego and heartbreak and disbelief colliding all at once. That was the moment the scream tore through the Montecito walls. Staff froze. A door slammed. Someone reportedly dropped a glass in the kitchen. And Megan stood speechless, because she realized, in real time, that Harry wasn't reacting to a PR move or a standard palace reshuffle. He was reacting to a shift in power so absolute, so intentional, that everything they had assumed about the monarchy's future was suddenly wrong. Completely wrong. The new monarchy wasn't symbolic. It wasn't procedural. It wasn't ceremonial. It was structural. It was decisive. And it centered entirely on Prince William. But the real twist? The reason the palace rushed the announcement? The reason they didn't warn Harry? The reason the tone felt cold? Wasn't just strategy. It was fear. Fear of what would happen if Harry knew too early. Fear of interference. Fear of backlash. Fear of leaks. And yeah, fear of the one thing the palace has always dreaded. Harry reacting exactly the way he did. But here's the question you should be asking right now. What were those 10 words? And what did they imply? What made Harry scream louder than he did during any interview, any confrontation, any royal conflict since stepping down? We'll get there. But before we reveal those 10 words, before we dive into the message, the sender, and the secret decision that pushed Harry over the edge, we need to step into Chapter 1 and uncover the cracks that formed long before this moment. Because the truth is, this explosion didn't start today. It began with a midnight phone call, one that set the tone for everything that followed, including the new monarchy, the hidden clause, the missing page, and the sealed order that would later shake the institution even further. And that's where our story begins. Have you ever been woken up by a phone call that felt wrong? Not because of the time, not because of the ringtone, but because your instincts told you, before you even reached for the phone, that whatever you were about to hear would change something forever? That's exactly what happened on the night everything shifted inside the royal family. It was just past 12:47 a.m. The kind of hour where even California's late-night energy has settled to a dull hum. Montecito was wrapped in silence, that eerie, heavy stillness that only wealthy gated neighborhoods seem to have after midnight. Most of the world was asleep, except for one phone, Harry's. The vibration cut through the room like a low growl. Not loud, but insistent, persistent, the kind of buzz that never brings good news. Harry opened his eyes slowly, squinting into the darkness, aware enough to know this wasn't normal. People don't call at this hour unless something is wrong, unless something is urgent, unless something is coming. A split second later, Megan stirred. She didn't sit up, but she whispered, voice raspy, thick with sleep. Who is it? Harry didn't answer. Because he didn't know. Not yet. But he had a guess. And that guess tightened his chest before he even picked up the phone. See, in the royal family, late-night calls aren't random. They are coded signals. They are warnings. They are the storm sirens before the palace walls shift. The last time Harry received a call at this hour, it was about medical updates. The time before that, it was about a security incident. And once, long ago, it was something far more devastating. So before he even checked the screen, he felt the dread. He reached for the phone, turned it over. Unknown number. Blocked caller ID. Just like royal calls always come. For one moment. One suspended, breathless second. Harry considered letting it ring out. Ignoring it. Pretending he never saw it. But you can't ignore the monarchy. Not really. Not ever. So he answered. Hello. A pause. A breath. And then a voice he recognized immediately. A voice that belonged to someone who only called him when things were already unraveling. Harry, it's me. He sat up instantly. Because that voice didn't belong to a palisade. It didn't belong to his secretary. It didn't belong to anyone who would sugarcoat or soften a blow. It belonged to someone who had always told him the truth, even when he didn't want to hear it. But before Harry could respond, before he could ask what happened, before he could brace himself, the voice continued. You need to know this, and you need to hear it from me before you see it anywhere else. That sentence was the first crack in the night, because in royal language, before you see it anywhere else means something public is coming, something major, something that will hit headlines, something that cannot be stopped. Harry swallowed hard. Tell me, he said. The voice hesitated, and that hesitation was worse than the call itself. It's William, the caller finally said. Harry froze, not because the name surprised him, but because of the tone. Flat, heavy, careful. What about him? Harry asked. The voice continued. There's going to be an announcement in the morning. A big one. Bigger than you think. And before it drops, I need you to understand something. Harry leaned forward, heart pounding. You are not going to like it. Now pause right here. Imagine being on the receiving end of that sentence. Imagine being told that something life-changing is coming, but that you're powerless to stop it. Imagine knowing that the monarchy, the institution you grew up in, is about to make a move without you. And imagine it coming from someone who doesn't exaggerate. That's the moment Harry realized something seismic was coming. Just tell me what's happening, he said, voice tight. And the caller finally delivered the first blow. William is taking over more than just duties. He's taking leadership, real leadership. They're repositioning the monarchy under him. Harry inhaled sharply. This was something he knew might happen one day. But not tonight. Not without warning. Not without conversation. What do you mean leadership? Harry pressed. Leadership of what? The caller answered with brutal honesty. Everything. Silence. The kind that stretches long enough for your brain to scramble, resist, then collapse into acceptance. Because Harry knew exactly what that word meant. Leadership in royal terms doesn't just mean public appearances. It means influence, authority, direction. It means decisions. It means the future. And it meant something else. If William was stepping into a leadership role, then someone else was stepping out. Harry felt a sharp heaviness in his chest. What about my father? He finally asked. Another pause. Charles approved it. At that moment, the room seemed to tilt. It wasn't just that William was rising. It was that the king himself had endorsed it. That the transition wasn't symbolic. It was structural. It was planned. It had momentum. Harry ran a hand over his face. He knew William was being prepared for kingship. That wasn't the issue. The issue was timing. The issue was secrecy. The issue was exclusion. Why hadn't anyone told him? Why was he hearing this from a midnight source instead of the palace directly? Why now? Harry asked, voice low, almost whispering. The caller took a deep breath. Public trust is shifting. Advisors believe William is the stabilizing figure the monarchy needs right now. And they want to show unity and direction. They want to draw a clear line. A line between who? Harry snapped. Another deep breath. Between William and you. That's when something inside Harry cracked. Not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly. The kind of crack that comes just before something much bigger breaks. Because he knew then, even before the announcement went public, that things had shifted beyond repair. William wasn't just stepping up. Harry was being pushed out. Not with a statement. Not with an argument. Not with a confrontation. With the one thing Harry had always feared most. Isolation. The caller continued. I'm telling you this because once the announcement goes out, the world will see William as the face of the monarchy. And they will see you as. Harry cut in sharply. As what? The answer landed like a hammer. As separate. Harry felt heat rise in his face. Separate. The word echoed. Separate from the institution. Separate from the family. Separate from the future. And beneath the anger, the panic, the disbelief, there was something softer. Something heartbreaking. Loss. Because for the first time, Harry recognized that the gap between him and William wasn't temporary anymore. It was cemented. Permanent. Institutional. The caller exhaled. There's more, they said quietly. And you're not going to like the rest either. Harry gripped the phone tighter. What else? He demanded. The voice lowered, as if bracing Harry for impact. Tomorrow's announcement isn't the full plan. There's a second phase, and it affects you directly. Harry felt his pulse spike. What plan? He asked. But the caller didn't answer immediately. Instead, They said the sentence that would haunt Harry for the entire night. You need to prepare yourself. This isn't just about William rising. It's about the monarchy redefining itself, without you in it. The room spun. Harry didn't speak. He couldn't. And before he could gather himself enough to respond, the caller delivered one final warning, one that set the stage for everything that followed. Harry, whatever you think is coming, it's worse. Much worse. And you're already too late to stop it. Click. The call ended. And the night, the one that began with a vibration in the dark, shifted into something else entirely. A countdown. Harry didn't move at first. Not physically. Not mentally. Not emotionally. He just sat there in the dim light of the bedroom, phone still in his hand, breath uneven, mind spinning with 1,000 thoughts colliding at once. Megan watched him carefully now, awake, alert, sensing the shift before he said a single word. What happened? She finally whispered. Harry didn't answer, not because he was hiding something, but because he didn't know how to explain what he had just heard. How do you tell your spouse, at 1 a.m, that your entire family has just taken a step forward by stepping over you? He swallowed hard and forced the words out. There's going to be an announcement about William. Megan blinked slowly. What kind of announcement? Harry looked down at the phone as if the answers might be written there. Then he said the sentence that hung like smoke in the room. He's taking over. More than before. A leadership role. A real one. Megan sat up straighter. Leadership of what? Harry met her eyes. Everything. There it was. The word again. Everything. And Megan reacted exactly the way you'd expect from someone who saw the situation with clear, strategic eyes. That doesn't make sense, she said. They wouldn't do something that major without telling you. Not even out of courtesy. Apparently they would, Harry said bitterly. Megan shook her head. No. Someone would have sent a message, a warning, something. This isn't normal procedure. Harry almost laughed. A short, humorless sound. They didn't consult me. They didn't inform me. They didn't ask me anything. They made the decision, and the announcement goes out tomorrow morning. Megan exhaled sharply, running a hand through her hair. There was worry in her eyes, but more than that, there was calculation. Because Megan knew what this meant. Not just emotionally, not just symbolically, but politically. Harry. This isn't a reshuffle, she said slowly. This is a restructuring. Harry nodded, jaw tight. They're drawing lines, he said, and I'm on the wrong side of them. But before Megan could respond, Harry's phone buzzed again. A new notification. Short. Cold. A simple alert. Statement expected from Buckingham Palace at 9 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time. Megan stared at it. That's in, she paused, doing the math, 8 hours. Harry's jaw clenched. This wasn't a warning. This wasn't an invitation. This was protocol, the bare minimum courtesy sent to external parties who might be affected by a public announcement. External. Not family. Not insider. External. Harry felt something inside him twist painfully. Megan finally spoke. Did the caller say why this is happening now? Harry nodded. Because they think William is what the monarchy needs. Stability. Unity. Control. And you're not useful to that image, Megan finished quietly. Harry didn't have to confirm it. The silence did it for him. But this wasn't the worst part, not by a long shot. The midnight call was just the beginning. The moment that set the emotional explosives in motion. The real detonation happened moments later. Harry stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. The moonlight washed over him, cold and unforgiving, outlining the tension in his shoulders. He said there's a second phase, Harry murmured. Megan looked up sharply. What do you mean second phase? Harry shook his head. I don't know. He wouldn't tell me. He said I wouldn't like it. Megan frowned deeply now. If William is stepping into full leadership, the second phase could only mean one thing, she said slowly. Harry turned to her. What? Megan hesitated. Not because she didn't know. Because she did. Realignment. Restructuring. A redefinition of the working royal family, she said. Which means they're deciding who is in and who is out. Harry felt a cold weight settle in his chest. Megan continued. And given everything, the interviews, the book, the lawsuits, the distance, Harry, you know what category they're putting you in. Harry turned away. He didn't want to hear it. He didn't want it to be true. He didn't want to accept that the institution he had been born into, the only system he ever knew, had just placed him outside the gates. And then the phone lit up again. A new message. Harry grabbed it. This wasn't a standard alert. This wasn't a neutral advisory. This was a direct message from someone who rarely reached out. Harry read the 10 words slowly, and Meghan watched as the blood drained from his face. Because in those 10 words, everything became clear. Everything. The reason he wasn't consulted. The reason the announcement was rushed. The reason he was excluded from plans about the monarchy's future. The reason the palace had grown colder with every passing month. The 10 words were simple, sharp, surgical, and they cut straight through the last thread of hope Harry carried. He felt heat rising behind his eyes. His throat tightened. His hands curled into fists. "Harry, what does it say?" Meghan asked quietly. Harry handed her the phone. She read the message once, then again, then a third time, slower, more carefully. Her jaw tightened. Her eyes widened. And for the first time that night, she looked afraid. Not for herself. Not for their public image. Not for the headlines. For Harry. Because these 10 words didn't just confirm his exclusion. They confirmed something far bigger. Something irreversible. Something that would shatter the fragile hope he still carried about his place in the monarchy. The message implied the one outcome Harry never believed would actually happen. And it came from someone who would never exaggerate. Someone who had no reason to lie. Someone who had always told the truth, especially when it hurt. Meghan whispered, "This is worse than we thought." Harry nodded. He already knew. Because this wasn't just a political shift. It was personal. It was targeted. It was final. He stepped back from the window, breath shaking, as the reality crashed into him. The monarchy wasn't waiting. The monarchy wasn't hesitating. The monarchy wasn't keeping the door open. It was closing it. Completely. And the announcement in the morning? That was only the beginning. Here's the truth the public never sees. Nothing, and I mean nothing, inside Buckingham Palace happens by accident. Every message is polished. Every photograph is staged. Every sentence in a press release is carved like stone. And every shift in leadership is the result of weeks, months, sometimes years of pressure building behind decorative doors the world will never enter. So when Buckingham Palace prepared to announce a new monarchy structure under William's leadership, it didn't start with William. It started with panic. A quiet panic, yes, but a panic nonetheless. Because inside the palace, the past 2 years had felt like walking on cracked glass. One wrong step, one careless headline, one family misstep could shatter the institution's fragile public standing completely. You have to remember this. The monarchy isn't just a family. It's a brand, a symbol, a survival machine. And in the last few years, that machine had been taking blows from every direction. Harry's memoir, Harry and Meghan's interviews, documentaries, lawsuits, leaks, staff resignations, public disagreements, social media firestorms, celebrity alliances, unpredictable narratives. It wasn't just messy, it was dangerous. But here's the twist the public didn't see. While Harry's chaos created noise, William's stability created momentum. Inside the palace, senior advisors, some of whom had been serving the crown since before William was born, began having quiet conversations. The kind that happened behind heavy wooden doors, where old portraits watch you like they know all your secrets. Conversations that started with simple observations. William is becoming the steady voice. He brings calm to every meeting. He doesn't react emotionally. He understands the public better than anyone. He listens. He waits. He thinks long-term. But the most important line repeated over and over, whispered by advisors, echoed by private secretaries, murmured by senior aides, was this: he is ready. Not ready eventually. Not ready theoretically. Ready now? And that word, now, was the seed that grew into the announcement that would send Harry spiraling. Because as William rose in quiet strength, something else rose too. Pressure. Pressure from Commonwealth nations wanting modernization. Pressure from UK officials wanting stability. Pressure from internal departments wanting direction. Pressure from global media wanting clarity. Pressure from the public wanting confidence. And the biggest source of pressure? Scandals. Not William's. Not Kate's. Not the King's. Harry's. Every time Harry spoke publicly, every interview, documentary, speech, accusation, the monarchy had to respond. Not with words, but with strategy, with adjustments, with contingency plans. It wasn't sustainable. And behind closed doors, The unspoken truth became impossible to ignore. If the monarchy wanted to show unity and strength, it needed a leader untouched by controversy. Someone calm, someone steady, someone reliable, someone who represented the future rather than the chaos of the present. That someone was William. But here's where things get even more complicated, because William didn't ask for this shift. He didn't lobby for it. He didn't push. He didn't pressure. He simply did the one thing the monarchy values above anything else. His duty. He showed up. Every day, every event, every meeting, every crisis. And that consistency made him more powerful than any speech could. But here's the irony. As William's leadership grew quietly, Harry's influence shrank loudly. His interviews got louder. His criticisms got sharper. His distance from the palace widened. And for the first time, even people who once defended him started asking a question the monarchy feared. Can Harry still be part of the future? Inside the palace, the answer slowly shifted from maybe to probably not to absolutely not. That shift didn't happen because of one moment. It happened because of many. Let's walk through a few of them. The moments that started stacking like dominoes until the palace had no choice but to act. Moment 1. The memoir. Staff inside the palace were prepared for criticism. They were prepared for emotional pain. But they were not prepared for the level of detail Harry shared. The conversations, the accusations, the betrayals laid out for millions to read. Moment 2. The interviews. Every time Harry sat down with a host, Oprah, Anderson Cooper, foreign media, advisors panicked. Not because of his words, necessarily, but because every interview required them to craft a crisis response quietly behind the scenes. Moment 3. The documentary deals. The palace viewed these as dangerous not because they were documentaries, but because they were unpredictable. Any moment could create a new scandal. Any scene could become a global headline. Moment 4. The lawsuits. Inside royal circles, lawsuits are rare. Very rare. The monarchy stays out of courtrooms at all costs. When Harry began filing suit after suit, the palace saw it not as legal action, but as instability. Moment 5. The leaks. Staffers began whispering. Everything we say will end up in a book or interview. Trust fractured. Once trust is gone inside the monarchy, the system collapses. Moment 6. The brand shift. Harry and Meghan moved from royal figures to celebrity figures, and that created an identity crisis. Was Harry acting as a duke? Or as a public personality? Or as an activist? The palace couldn't define his role because he couldn't define it. Moment 7. The public perception slide. As polls shifted in the UK, advisors saw numbers that terrified them. Sympathy turning into confusion, confusion turning into frustration, frustration turning into detachment. Moment 8. The internal debates. Senior aides began asking the unthinkable. Should Harry be part of the long-term monarchy plan? Moment 9. The quiet meetings. Private discussions began, small at first, then larger. Meetings about continuity, about stability, about symbolism, about the future. Moment 10. The conclusion. If the monarchy was going to survive the modern world, it needed a leader the public trusted. That leader was William. And here's the twist no one expected. The push didn't come from Charles. It came from the advisors, from the institution itself, from the walls of the palace whispering, William is ready. And here's where things become even more intriguing. William resisted. Yes, resisted. Because William didn't want this shift to deepen the rift with his brother. He didn't want to accelerate a transition that would push Harry even further away. He didn't want leadership if it meant destroying whatever faint possibility of peace remained. But the institution didn't care about personal relationships. It cared about survival. So the pressure on William became suffocating. One senior advisor even said, if we wait any longer, the monarchy won't be prepared for what's coming. And that, what's coming, wasn't defined, but everyone felt it. Political shifts. Public expectations. Global scrutiny. Internal transitions. The world was changing, and the monarchy had to adapt or crumble. And so, behind the scenes, the structure began taking shape. Drafts were written, roles redefined, departments reorganized. Communications teams replaced phrases like modernizing with streamlining, simplifying, restructuring. All of it pointing toward one outcome. A future shaped around William, not Harry. But the palace had one problem. One major obstacle. one unpredictable variable: Harry. Because if Harry found out too early, he might react publicly. He might leak information. He might spin the narrative. He might create chaos. And chaos was the one thing the monarchy couldn't afford. So the decision was made, quietly, firmly, unanimously. Harry would not be consulted. Harry would not be warned. Harry would not be included. The transition would be executed without him. But here's the detail that will make your jaw drop. The palace didn't just exclude Harry. They prepared for his reaction. They predicted anger. They predicted panic. They predicted backlash. But they did not predict the scream, or the 10-word message that would push him over the edge. The hours leading up to the announcement were some of the most intense Buckingham Palace had experienced in years. Not because of scandal. They'd survived scandals bigger than entire countries, but because of what was at stake, the entire future identity of the monarchy. And the pressure wasn't coming from just one direction. It was coming from everywhere. Inside the palace, the atmosphere was unnervingly tense. Advisors paced hallways with half-finished coffees. Communications staff triple-checked drafts. Senior aides passed folders in hushed exchanges like they were carrying classified intelligence. Even the walls felt tighter, thicker, holding secrets, because everyone knew what was about to happen. At precisely 9 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time, the monarchy would take a decisive step into a future centered around William. And any step into the future inevitably means stepping away from the past. But let's back up for a moment, because the final hours before the announcement reveal something crucial. Not everyone agreed about how to handle Harry. In fact, an internal battle erupted inside the palace. A quiet one, a restrained one, but a battle nonetheless. Two factions emerged behind closed doors. Faction A, mention him. These advisors believed acknowledging Harry, even briefly, was essential. A nod, a line, a reassurance, something to soften the blow. They argued that excluding Harry completely would escalate tensions, cause unpredictable damage, and risk making the monarchy look cold or vindictive. Their logic? It's better to include him lightly than to provoke him deeply. Faction B, leave him out. This group was larger, stronger, and more influential. They argued that Harry was no longer aligned with the monarchy's vision, that acknowledging him would undermine the message of unity, that he was a liability in a moment designed to show strength. Their logic? Harry left. We don't center future plans around someone who walked away. And behind those arguments, behind the long sighs, the tense meetings, the whispered hallway debates, was the shadow of something deeper. Fear. Fear that Harry might explode publicly. Fear that he would interpret any mention as criticism. Fear that he would weaponize even a polite line. Fear that he would misinterpret nuances and create media storms. And perhaps the sharpest fear of all, fear that Harry no longer understood the monarchy well enough to not take everything personally. In the end, Faction B won. Not loudly, not dramatically, but decisively. The final draft of the announcement was stripped down, tightened, streamlined, focused entirely on William, the king, and the institution. Harry's name did not appear. Not once. Not even indirectly. And the palace believed this was the safest path. They were wrong. But the key moment, the one that sealed Harry's fate, didn't come from the communications team. It came from the king, Charles. Because while advisors debated the optics, Charles intervened only once, with a decision that stunned even his closest aides. He insisted that William's transition into leadership had to be portrayed as unanimous, stable, and forward-facing. No hesitation. No emotional undertones. No conflict. He wanted a message that said, "This is the future, and the future is clear." And clarity meant simplicity, and simplicity meant exclusion. Charles wasn't trying to hurt Harry, but he was trying to protect the monarchy. From Harry. He didn't say this out loud, of course. Kings rarely do. But his signature on the final document said everything. And that signature? It gave the communications team a green light to proceed without compromise. But while the palace was polishing sentences, Harry was spiraling. Let's go back to Montecito, hours before sunrise. Harry hadn't slept. His mind replayed the midnight call over and over, twisting between disbelief, anger, and dread. Meghan brewed coffee neither of them drank. The silence between them wasn't cold. It was heavy, swollen with anticipation, because they both knew. When an institution moves quietly, the impact is loud. At one point, Harry stood in the kitchen, staring blankly at the marble countertop, replaying the caller's warning. You're already too late to stop it. And that single line stuck to him like a cold chain. Too late. Too late. Too late. There's something uniquely painful about realizing you've lost control of a narrative you once owned. That your voice no longer matters to the people who raised you. That your influence, once so powerful, has been replaced by caution. Harry felt all of that. But Meghan felt something different. She wasn't raised inside the monarchy. She never internalized its rituals. She didn't see it as a legacy. She saw it as a system. And systems, in her mind, don't simply move on. They phase out. So she said the one thing Harry wasn't prepared to hear. They aren't ignoring you, Harry. They're replacing you. Harry flinched like she'd slapped him. Replace. It was worse than separate. Worse than excluded. Worse than sidelined. Replace meant erased. Replace meant unnecessary. Replace meant obsolete. And that's when Harry's phone buzzed again. Not a call. Not a news alert. A private message. From a source inside the palace. Someone who had always been honest with him. Someone who never sugarcoated anything. The message was only 10 words. But it was these 10 words that triggered the scream someone later overheard. The 10 words that made Harry slam the countertop. Made Meghan drop her phone. Made the entire house freeze. The message wasn't the announcement. It wasn't the new structure. It was worse. Much worse. Because those 10 words didn't describe the future of the monarchy. They described Harry's future without it. The message suggested something Harry had never imagined could be real. A possibility he always dismissed as paranoia. A fear he believed the monarchy would never act upon. The message suggested Harry was not simply being excluded. He was being removed. Not symbolically. Not quietly. Not emotionally. Formally. And the sender didn't dress it up. They didn't cushion it. They delivered it like someone ripping off a bandage. Phase 2 eliminates your role entirely. Permanently. Without appeal. Harry's heart stopped. Permanently. Without appeal. He stared at the screen, hands shaking. Phase 2 wasn't an update. It was a warning. And as the implications crashed through him, the scream tore out. Raw. Emotional. Devastating. Because he finally understood. This wasn't William's rise. This wasn't Charles's strategy. This wasn't media pressure. This was the monarchy's decision, collectively, deliberately, to define a future that no longer included him. A future that didn't need him, didn't consider him, didn't even plan for him. And the announcement in a few hours? That was only step 1. The real destruction was coming in step 2. Have you ever felt like you knew the whole story, only to discover that the most important part was the piece someone removed? Because that's exactly what happened inside Buckingham Palace in the final 48 hours before the announcement. And it's the piece Harry eventually discovered, the piece that sent him over the edge, the piece that explained everything the palace wasn't saying out loud. A page. A single page. A page that should have been included in the official announcement draft, but wasn't. Not because of an accident. Not because of an oversight. Not because someone forgot to attach it. It was removed. Deliberately. And the moment it disappeared from the official documents, everything else began to make sense. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. To understand the missing page, you need to see what happened inside the palace the night the final version of the announcement was approved. The tension, the arguments, the edits so subtle that one misplaced word could start a firestorm. Because while the public saw a polished statement, behind the scenes, there was conflict. A quiet war between truth and strategy. Between transparency and control, between acknowledging the full reality and protecting the institution. The meeting took place in the Red Room, one of the palace's most strictly controlled private spaces, reserved for sensitive discussions and high-level decisions. The kind of room where portraits watch silently, where the polished table reflects the weight of centuries, where even the air feels tight with responsibility. The meeting began at 7:26 p.m. Inside were 2 senior advisors, the king's private secretary, a communications director, 2 legal consultants, and William, not Harry, not Meghan, not any representative of the Sussex side, just the people shaping the future without them. And the tension was immediate. We should keep the page, one advisor said. It's factual, it's accurate, and transparency is important. No, another advisor countered sharply. It will ignite controversy. We can't afford that. It's already known internally. Internal is internal. Public is different. If we remove it, he'll find out. He's not part of this process anymore. That's exactly why we need to. No. William sat silently through this exchange, jaw tense, hands folded. He wasn't speaking, but he was listening. And every advisor knew his silence meant he was thinking, calculating, weighing the consequences. The legal consultant slid the page across the table. It was simple, direct, written in neutral institutional language that masked the severity underneath. It addressed future roles within the monarchy, defined responsibilities, outlined expectations, clarified who would be part of the long-term vision and who wouldn't. Harry's name appeared only once. Only once. But one appearance was enough to cause an explosion. Because the line beside Harry's name didn't describe a pause, or a sabbatical, or a review. It described a withdrawal. A formal, permanent withdrawal from future roles. The language wasn't hostile. In fact, it was so clinically phrased that at first glance, it seemed harmless. Dry? Administrative. Almost forgettable. But hidden beneath the neutrality was a message sharp enough to wound anyone who once believed they still had a place in the institution. And everyone at that table knew it. That's why the debate began. That's why the room felt tighter with every passing minute. That's why the page sat there like a live grenade. We cannot include this, one advisor insisted. It's too risky. Too risky, another advisor snapped. Pretending nothing is changing is more risky. A senior aide leaned forward. Look, we all know Harry will react. But reacting to being mentioned is better than reacting to being erased. The communications director exhaled. Mentioning him gives him oxygen. He'll interpret it however he wants. The press will run wild. The public will speculate. And we'll be forced to respond. The legal consultant tapped the page. What we do now sets precedent. If we include it, we legitimize a severing of responsibility. If we don't include it, we risk confusion later. The room buzzed with tension. But William? He stayed silent. Until someone finally turned to him. Sir, we need your view. The room froze. Because William rarely intervened in communication strategy. He was careful, measured, methodical. The kind of leader who didn't interrupt unless he had already made up his mind. He looked at the page. Read it slowly. Let the weight settle. Then he said 5 words. Words that shaped the fate of the announcement. Words that sealed Harry's exclusion. Words that made the missing page disappear. Keep it internal for now. Every advisor in the room understood exactly what that meant. Internal meant restricted. Internal meant confidential. Internal meant private. Internal meant Harry would never be briefed. Internal meant strategic omission. By the time the meeting ended at 9:03 p.m., the page had been pulled. Filed separately. Locked away. The official press release was finalized without it. Clean. Controlled. Future-focused. But here's the most important part. The part that explains everything. Harry was never supposed to see it. Never supposed to know it existed. Never supposed to realize a page defining his future had been severed from the announcement on purpose. But secrets in the monarchy don't stay secrets. Not forever. And the missing page didn't stay missing. Someone leaked it. Not to the public. Not to the press. Not to tabloids. To Meghan. It arrived quietly. Anonymously. Through an encrypted channel. No greeting. No explanation. No signature. Just the page. And Meghan read every line. Her expression changed slowly. Confusion, then shock, then anger, then something darker. When she finished reading it, she whispered, "Oh my God, Harry needs to see this." Because that page, that single sheet of paper, didn't just define Harry's exclusion. It confirmed it. It validated his fears. It revealed the truth the palace didn't say out loud. And when Harry finally read it, everything inside him detonated. But what he discovered after that page, what was hidden beneath the hidden clause, what connected directly to Phase 2, that's where the real shock begins. Harry didn't open the page immediately. When Meghan handed him her phone, he could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she held her breath, the way she avoided looking him directly in the eyes. Not because she was hiding something, but because she knew exactly how this would hit him. And she wasn't wrong. "Harry, you need to read this," she said quietly. He took her phone. The document filled the screen. A simple header. A plain font. No dramatic language. No emotional cues. Just cold, institutional clarity. Harry began reading slowly, almost cautiously. like someone approaching a wound they already know is going to hurt. Every line felt heavier than the one before it. And then he reached it. The line. The single, devastating line that had caused all the fighting inside the Red Room. The line that had been removed from the public announcement. A line that defined his future in 10 unemotional words. It read, "The Duke of Sussex will no longer hold future royal roles." That was it. No explanation. No softening. No footnote. Just a formal, sterile erasure of everything he once was. Harry didn't blink. Didn't breathe. Didn't move. For a few seconds, the world went silent. Meghan watched him carefully, waiting for the reaction she knew was coming. But when it came, it wasn't loud. Not yet. It was quiet. Almost too quiet. Harry whispered, "They made it official." Meghan stepped forward. "Harry, listen." But he shook his head. "No. They made it official," he repeated, voice cracking on the final word. When you're part of the monarchy, really part of it, roles aren't just job titles. They're identity, purpose, responsibility, legacy. Harry wasn't just losing a seat at the table. He was losing the table, the room, the building, the institution, everything. And he knew it. Because that line, 10 words, didn't describe a pause. It didn't describe a suspension. It didn't describe a change in duties. It described a finality, a severing, a closure, a door being shut, gently, quietly, politely, but shut nonetheless. Then something even stranger happened. Harry scrolled to the bottom of the page. There was a reference code, a timestamp, a classification label. Internal use only, confidential. Harry stared at it. "Confidential," he muttered. "So they wanted this hidden." Meghan nodded. "That's why someone leaked it to us," she said. But that raised a bigger question. If this page wasn't meant to be public, if it wasn't meant to be seen by Harry, if it was locked away in internal files, who leaked it? And why? Harry looked up. Who sent this? Meghan didn't answer. Because she didn't know. The message had no name attached. No number. No metadata. Just the page. Meghan said, "Someone inside wanted you to know the truth." Harry exhaled slowly, a bitter laugh escaping. Or someone wanted me to react. Meghan froze at that. Because she hadn't considered it. But Harry had. And his instincts were ringing like alarms. "Why now?" he whispered. "Why leak this to me hours before the announcement? Why not earlier? Why not later?" Meghan stepped closer. "You think they're trying to trigger you?" Harry didn't respond, which was answer enough. And then he said something she didn't expect. "This isn't the full page." Meghan blinked. "What do you mean it's not the full page?" Harry pointed to a formatting gap, a slight indentation in the layout, a space where text should have been. "A line was removed," he said. "A second part." Meghan's eyes widened. "You're sure?" "Positive," Harry said. "I've read thousands of internal documents. They follow structure. This one doesn't." He scrolled again. Same gap. Same indentation. Same missing block of text. "That's what they didn't want me to see," Harry murmured. Meghan swallowed hard. "What do you think it said?" Harry didn't answer right away. He walked toward the window, staring out into the dark California night, as if searching for something far beyond the glass. His mind was moving fast now, piecing together fragments from the midnight call, the internal debates, the 10-word message, the missing page, the second phase. And then he said it. The second line probably describes consequences. Meghan's breath caught. Consequences for what? For not being part of the system, Harry said. For stepping away. For refusing to participate. For not being aligned. For not complying. The word hung heavy in the room. Complying. Meghan whispered. "You think they're punishing you?" Harry looked at her. Eyes dark, jaw tense, expression shaken. "No," he said. "They're preparing." "Preparing for what?" Meghan asked. Harry didn't hesitate. "For a future where I'm not just out of the monarchy, but removed from every possible connection to it." Meghan stared at him, stunned. And just as she began to respond, Harry's phone buzzed again. Another message. Another internal leak. Another anonymous sender. But this one wasn't a document. It was a photo. A blurry, angled picture, taken quickly, secretly, of notes from a meeting room. On it were scribbles, bullet points, and a heading circled 3 times. Second phase proposal, implementation timeline. Harry's heart dropped, and Meghan froze. Because the section beneath that heading contained phrases that none of them ever expected to see. Formal distancing protocols. Removal of discretionary privileges. Adjustment of titles. Reassessment of HRH usage. Public clarification of roles. Alignment under Prince William. Meghan covered her mouth. Oh my God. This wasn't a restructure. This wasn't a reshuffling. This wasn't modernization. This was surgical, deliberate, institutional removal. And the final bullet point, the one written in darker ink, underlined twice, made Harry's blood run cold. Communication strategy. Preemptive positioning to mitigate expected Sussex backlash. He stepped back, stunned, shaken, speechless. Because